Hello, my true crime lovelies. How are you? I hope you are as lovely in life as you are in my mind. All right, we're going to go over Sarah Boone's call logs, the one that has all of the activity as she was prepping her paperwork for trial. You guys said you wanted to see it. It's going to go from July 4th to August 18th. And so we can see if more of her friends are answering, who we suspect is still helping her with her documents based on frequency. And, did her son answer her calls? Because she's claiming she doesn't get enough calls, even though we heard in the hearing trial that sometimes she talks to him 6 or 7 times a week. Like, are you dating your son, man? Is there a little Oedipus Rex thing going on? No wonder Brian is concerned. All right, but let's thank the members. I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate you. If you appreciate the content, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you on the other side of the intro. All right, we're going to get right into it. I've got Sugar Bear next to me. If that's going to bother you, protect your mental health. We'll catch you on the next one. Okay, so we are starting with the 4th of July. And actually, let me go to the top in case this is your first time being nosy with us and looking at the calls. I have put in who the caller is. I've redacted the majority of their phone number. Obviously, these are all for Sarah. Then we have the date. We have the result. So CP is called party, hung up. There's not accepted, which means they declined the call, no answer. They just did not pick up. And then sometimes it will say inmate hung up, right? Then it gives us the time that the call happened. It's in military hours, the duration. So you'll see a lot of zeros, right? When it's not accepted, that makes sense. And then the call type, prepay, public, free courtesy marketing, and sometimes she calls collect. All right, we all on the same page? Whoop, whoop. Let's get into it. So on the 4th of July, she called Nicole over in Australia. Not accepted. $9. Oh my God, where's my brain? She called at 9:39 in the morning. I don't know what the time difference is for Miss Nicole. Anybody know in general the Australian time zone? So that was prepaid. She declined the call. Sarah called again a few minutes later at 9:42. Nicole did not accept. She calls her son 17:59 or 5:59, almost 6 o'clock, and he did not accept. The 4th of July at 6 o'clock, he did not accept. She calls Brian at 6:01 on the 4th. It's a holiday, mind you. He does not accept. Then she calls him 2 minutes later. He does not accept. Then she calls the son a few minutes after Brian. So she called him at 6:03. Then she calls Brian at 6:05. I'm sorry, she called Brian at 6:03, and then she called the son at 6:05. It's the 4th of July. You think they might be looking at some fireworks? He doesn't accept. Then she calls a minute later, Brian, at 6:06. He does not accept. Calls the son on the 5th of July, 9:35 in the morning. He does not accept. Son, he doesn't answer on the 5th of July. 1 minute later at 9:36. 9:38, she calls Nicole. Not accepted. Calls Brian at 9:40. Not accepted. I guess she's bored. She's just back-to-back dialing. And won't the other inmates get annoyed? You're just like dialing, hang up, dialing, hang up. Hear Me Out sent me a photo of a rotary phone. Imagine her having to do this on a rotary phone. We'd probably get more minutes in between. Oh, yeah? Okay, be careful. So wait, it might break. Don't. He's jumping on top of the dog crate. He's in a jumping mood these last 2 days. Okay, so then Peter Gunthal, she calls on the 5th of July at 2:35. It's a prepaid call. Peter answers. Peter is of the one half of the Delapine Creative. He originally offered to get her a family court lawyer, as we saw from the catastrophe that was August 25th. She was pro se, so not sure what happened, but they talked for 10 minutes and 25 seconds. It is suspected he is the one writing up and submitting her letters because some of them get submitted electronically. Could Nicole do it? Yes. Time difference factor. I also know from Lana that Peter was pinning some of them prior to Lana's death. So I'm just, extrapolating that data and concluding that he's still typing them up for her. Oh my God. Okay, so the Sun on the 6th of July, not accepted at 9:28 in the morning. A minute later, she calls Nicole at 9:29. Nicole does not accept. She calls her at 9:31 in the morning. Nicole does not accept. She calls Peter G on the 6th. And it's 2:35, she calls him. They talk for 22 minutes and 37 seconds. It was a prepaid call. So if Sarah doesn't have any money, she only has she has her flying monkeys money. I guess they're technically giving her the money to prepay for these calls. Someone let me know what your hypothesis is. Okay. On the 7th of July, she calls her son. Called, party, hung up. So the Sun hung up the phone. It was 1:38 in the afternoon, and they talked for 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Then Peter G gets a call, and she calls at 2:20. She hangs up. You see here is where we have one of those inmate hung up. They talk for nearly the full time, 29 minutes and 54 seconds. If you're new here, their max time is 30 minutes. She could hang up and call right back, but it's 30 minutes and then they time out on the call. And that was a prepaid call. So she calls Peter again on the 7th at 6:52. He doesn't accept. She calls her brother Philip on the 7th at 6:54. He does not accept. So is he really in Israel right now? I have so many questions about that. Okay. Philip, I just did that. Like, are we even actively involved in that situation? It's a whole other political thing. Let's not go there. Okay, so Peter G, she calls us on the 7th, not accepted. That was at 6:57. We have a new entry, Stephanie Lenzini. The phone actually comes up as Stephen M. Mara, but when I went digging around, it had that Stephen was deceased. So I put the Stephanie because it said also owner. Inmate hung up. Maybe a misdial. I don't know. But that was at 10:04. It didn't get a chance to connect. The inmate hung up. Sarah was like, oops, possibly. Okay, so then on the 8th, that also was on the 8th. But the second one on the 8th at 10:05, she calls Nicole and they max out. They time out, or it says time up. They go the full 30 minutes. And then so 10:05, that would be like till 10:35, right? She calls her back on the 8th at 11:26, and they talk for another 17 minutes. Then she calls Peter on the 8th. Call party hung up. She called him at 5:41. They talked for 14 minutes. She calls back at 6:39. He doesn't accept. Then she calls it 6:41. He doesn't accept. If someone doesn't accept, I don't know why you call back 2 minutes later. If they didn't answer, I could see like, oh, maybe they're in the bathroom. You're being optimistic. But if they're actively pushing the do not accept button, girl, move along. So then, not to be deterred, she calls him the next day in the afternoon. So on the 9th at 2:24. He answers. They talk for 11 minutes, 4 seconds, and then he hangs up. So on the 9th, she calls him again, this time in the evening at 6:18. They talk for 9 minutes and 46 seconds, and she calls her son the next day at 5:20. They talk for 29:48, and then he hangs up. She calls Nicole on the 11th. She calls her at 8:57 a.m., 8:59, 9:01, 10:57, 11 o'clock. Nicole accepts not nah phone call, not a one. Then on the also on the 11th, she calls Peter G at 2:42. He does not accept. She calls him again at 2:44. He does accept, and they talk for 29 minutes and 16 seconds, and then he hangs up. So there is a precedence they're setting. They don't accept, then she calls 2 minutes later. They do accept, so of course she's like, it worked one time, I'm gonna try it again. So on the 12th of July, she calls Nicole at 9:28 in the morning. They talk for 25 minutes and 57 seconds. It's a prepaid call. Nicole hangs up. Then she calls her son on the 12th at 2:29. He does not accept. Calls him again on the 12th at 3 o'clock. They talk for the full 30 minutes, and then they time out the call. That was a prepaid call. Peter G, she calls on the 12th at 5:29. They talk for almost the full 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 54 seconds, and then he hangs up. Calls her son on the 12th. So did they already talk once? Yeah, they already talked for 30 minutes on the 12th at 3 o'clock, and so then she's calling him again. At 6:30. They only talk for a second, then he hangs up. Then she tries again at 7 o'clock. It says pin limit, so they're maybe out of calls. Then also on the 12th, she calls at 7:01. They talk for 37 seconds. Also on the 12th, it's 7:01 again, pin limit 0. So I don't know how it communicates to her that it's a pin limit, but it's like, girl, you ain't got no more time with this one. Okay, and then on the 13th, she calls Nicole multiple times. She calls her at 8:49 in the morning, 8:51 in the morning, 9:50 in the morning, 9:52 in the morning on the 13th. None of these are accepted. She calls her son at 9:55 in the morning. They talk for 6 minutes, 12 seconds, and then he hangs up. She is trying to call again. We're still on the 13th. Good Lord. She calls her at 11:13, 11:15, 11:40. 11:15. So 3 calls to Nicole, not accepted. Then she moves on to Brian at 11:44, not accepted. 11:46. She talks to Brian for a minute and 32 seconds, and then she hangs up the phone. Must have been a super important call, or Brian was telling her how much he doesn't care. Okay, Nicole. She's back to Nicole, still on the 13th, not accepted at 2:30. She calls Peter G, also on the 13th at 2:33. They talk for 8 minutes and 51 seconds. She calls again Peter G at 3:03. She's hit her pin limit, so the call's not going through. Duration is 0. Then she calls him a minute later. It still says pin limit. It's like arguing with the stop sign. Still gonna say stop, ma'am. Then on the 13th, she calls him a minute after that, 15:10, so 3:10, and that one is not accepted. Then on the 13th, she calls him at 3:12. Seems like we've overcome our pin limit issue. They talk for 11 minutes, 28 seconds, and then Sarah hangs up. Or sorry, Peter hangs up. The next one Sarah hangs up on. She talks to her son on the 13th at 5:50. They talk for 3 minutes, 12 seconds, and then she hangs up. She calls Nicole on the 14th at 9:40 in the morning, and she hangs up before Nicole can respond. Then she calls Nicole at 9:42 on the 14th. They talk for 4 minutes and 24 seconds. This is a free call. And Nicole hangs up. Calls Nicole back at 10:30. They talk for 30 minutes. And they time out their call. That was a prepaid call. So maybe Nicole was like, hey, what's going on, girl? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I really got to finish my laundry. Call me back. I would have been like, this is my free call. I don't know if they can tell. So here we see like just free call. Then we see free courtesy marketing call, which I'm guessing like the GTO comm people give them free calls so they can get a little taste, you know, get a little taste for free, get you to come back and pay. Okay, so the 15th, 10:51 in the morning, she's talking to Nicole for 29 minutes and 42 seconds, and then Nicole hangs up. Calls her son at 1:58. He doesn't accept. Still on the 15th, calls her brother Philip. It's not accepted. She calls him at 2:01. Peter G, she calls on the 15th at 3:29, not accepted. Calls him back at 6:12 and he doesn't accept. She calls her son also on the 15th at 6:14. They talk for 24 minutes. So she's just scanning. She's looking for someone to talk to, right? This is a prepaid call for 24 minutes. It says time up, which is interesting because it's only 24 and not 30, but maybe it has something to do with the prepaid card. Nicole is called at 7:16. I'm sorry, on July 16th at 10:54. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, 10:54, not accepted. She calls Nicole back at 10:57. And they talk for 27 minutes, 25 seconds on a prepaid call, and then Nicole hangs up. So she's trying Peter on the 16th. She calls him at 5:47 and 5:49. He does not accept. Then she calls her son at 5:51 and he does not accept. Back to Nicole. We are now on the 17th. She calls Nicole at 9:57 in the morning. And then again at 9:58. Nicole does not accept. She tries again at 10:03. Nicole accepts. They talk for 24 minutes and 37 seconds. And then Sarah hangs up. Still on the 17th at 2:43, 2:45, she calls Nicole. Her calls are not accepted. Then she calls Brian at 4:48 and 4:50. And 4:52, he does not accept. At 4:54, he does accept. They talk for 2 minutes and 3 seconds, and then she hangs up. Whenever she hangs up with Brian and it's short, I just imagine her slamming down the phone. Anybody else? Peter G, she calls on the 17th still at 5:41. No answer. Or actually, she hangs up. So before he does anything, that's one of the free courtesy marketing calls. Then she calls her son on a free courtesy marketing call. It's not accepted. She calls him at 5:47. Then she calls him again at 5:48. Neither one is accepted. 8:05, she calls Peter. He does not accept. Or not 8:05, sorry, 6:05. And then 6:07, she calls the son. They talk for 19 minutes and 24 seconds on a prepaid call. And then he hangs up. She's back to calling Nicole. We're on the 18th now, 8:47. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, she's looking for her friend. And then 8:55, 8:57, 9 o'clock. So finally, Nicole answers at 9 o'clock. They talk for 14 minutes and 10 seconds, and then Nicole hangs up. She calls her son at 2:35. He doesn't accept. Calls Peter G at 2:37. He accepts, and they talk for 23 minutes and 54 seconds. So still on the 18th, calls her son at 5:38. They talk for 12 minutes and 22 seconds. He hangs up. She tries Nicole at 9:28 on the 19th of July. She doesn't accept. She calls Philip, her brother, on the 19th at 1:44. They talk for 11 minutes and 57 seconds. Then she calls her son on the 19th at 5:19 and 5:21. He does not accept. 5:22, she decides to call Peter. She hangs up before he does anything. Then 5:47, she's back to calling her son. He doesn't accept. 6:07, she's calling Peter. 6:08, 6:10, she's calling Peter. He doesn't accept. 6:12, she calls her son. He answers. They talk for 3 seconds, and then he hangs up. Maybe he's like, Mom, I'm busy. Click. Then she calls Nicole on the 20th. So the 20th is the day that the 33-page rant was created. The nonsensical, what she called her pretrial, but really it was like she threw a little bit of the parenting stuff in there. She threw some inappropriate, not correctly documented citations. Like, it was a hot mess. But she talked to Nicole that day for 10 minutes and 38 seconds, and then she hung up. Oh no, sorry. That was at 10:38 in the morning. Nicole did not answer. Apologies. So then she calls Nicole at 10:42, and that one's not accepted. She calls her at 10:44, and that's not accepted. She moves on to Peter G. 10:46. She calls him. It's not accepted. We're still on the 20th. Peter does answer when she calls at 1:43, and they talk for 29 minutes, 33 seconds. Then she calls him at 2:45, and they talk for 20 minutes and 58 seconds. So I wonder if they're working on the draft, right? So, because that's a little, 49 minutes they talk, almost an hour. So then at 5:32, she talks to her son for 29 minutes and 30 seconds, and then he hangs up. Same day, she calls back at 6:35, and they talk for another nearly 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 45 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then she calls Nicole, 9:23. We're on the 21st of July now. So 9:23 in the morning, 9:25. Nicole does not accept. Those are free calls. Alrighty. Did you drink all my electrolytes?
No.
It looks like it's empty. So we're on the 21st. She calls her son, 2:51. They talk for 4 minutes and 39 seconds. She calls him back in the evening at 6:08. They talk for almost 30 minutes at 29 minutes and 58 seconds. Ooh. Those are prepaid calls. She calls Nicole on the 22nd at 8:36 in the morning, 8:38 in the morning. Nicole does not answer. She calls her back at 8:40. She does answer, and they talk for 29 minutes, 49 seconds, and then Nicole hangs up. Also on the 22nd, she calls her son at 5:54. They talk for 12 minutes, 57 seconds, and then she calls him the next day, the 23rd, at 5:41. They talk for almost 30 minutes at 29:43. This one says prepay APOC versus the public. Anybody know what that is? Let us know in the comments. Then Nicole, she calls on the 24th, 8:41 in the morning, 8:43 in the morning. Nicole does not accept. She moves on to Brian at 8:45 in the morning, and 8:47, Brian does not accept. She goes back to Nicole at 8:49, and Nicole does not accept. And she was like, let me see what Brian's doing. 11:51, 11:53. 2:25, 2:28. Brian ain't got time for her. He answers none of those. She calls her son, also on the 24th, at 6:25. They talk for almost 30 minutes. That is a prepay APOC call. Nicole, she calls again. Oh no, it's a new day. It's a new day. 9:19 a.m., 9:21 a.m., 10:22 a.m. Nicole does not accept. We move on to the 26th. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. 10:01 she calls Nicole. 10:02. Nicole ain't got time. At 6:21 she calls her son. They talk for 29 minutes, 45 seconds. Then he hangs up. She calls Nicole again. Oh no, new day, 27th. She calls Nicole at 9:54. Nicole does not accept. Then she calls her 2 minutes later at 9:56, and they time out. They talk for a full 30 minutes on a prepay call. Then she calls Jennifer DeGraff. Couldn't find anything on Jennifer. No socials. But I believe she's new or newish or infrequent, but she doesn't accept nonetheless at 26 or 126 and 128. Then she calls her son, also on the 27th, at 1:30. Talks for 4 minutes.
Well, Father.
Yeah?
It's tiny.
Okay. High five. Then David LaFontaine, who adopted her blind and deaf dogs, Helen and Keller. 29:41. Shout out to Summa Cum Loudmouth for the names Helen and Keller. She talks to him for almost 30 minutes and then he hangs up. She called him at 2:37. This is the 28th. This is the day the 33-page rant hits the docket. So she talks to Nicole, or no, she does not. She calls Nicole at 9:35. Nicole does not accept. She calls her at 10:21. Nicole does not accept. She calls her at 10:26. And Nicole answers. They talk for 4 minutes and 52 seconds. Also on the 29th, she calls her back at 11:17. They talk for the full 30 minutes and time it out. Then she calls her son at 7:27 in the evening. They talk for 29 minutes and 49 seconds. Then she calls Nicole. It's the next day, the 30th of July. She gives Nicole a little ring, ring, ring at 8:53, 8:56, 10:17. Not accepted. She calls her at 10:38 and there's no answer. She calls her at 10:40 and they talk for 18 minutes and 24 seconds. Then Sarah hangs up. That's a prepaid call. So on the 31st, she calls her son at 3:08. They talk for 3 minutes, 36 seconds. Calls him back at 5:32. He does not accept that call. That is one of the free courtesy marketing calls. Let's see. Also on the 31st, she calls her son at 5:34, 6:28, 6:31. He accepts not one of those. Those are all free courtesy marketing calls. Then she calls Nicole on August 1st, 8:53, 8:55, 8:58. Nicole does not accept. Then at 9:16, Sarah calls and they chitty chat for 30 minutes. Calls her son on the 1st of August at 3:21, 3:23, 3:20. Oh no. So 3:23, those two, the son doesn't call. Then at 3:25, she calls Brian. It's not accepted. She calls the son at 6:39, not accepted. Calls Nicole at 6:39. And then she hangs up before Nicole can do anything. And then she calls Brian at 6:41. He doesn't accept. She calls the son 2 minutes later at 6:43. He accepts. And they talk for 29 minutes and 58 seconds on a prepaid call. Then we're back to Nicole. It's in the evening, U.S. time. Oh, wait, is it? I'm mixing up my lines. It's not. It's the next day. It's the 2nd 9:55 in the morning, she calls Nicole. 9:57, she calls Nicole. Nicole does not accept. 2 minutes later, she calls Brian at 9:59. He does not accept. She goes back to calling Nicole at 10:01 and 10:09. Nicole does not accept. Then she goes back to calling Brian at 10:14. He does not accept. That's all on the second. We're still on the second. She calls Nicole at 10:16. She does not answer. Calls her son at 3:24 twice. He doesn't answer either of those. Then 3:25, he doesn't answer. Then the next day, on the 3rd of August, she calls him at 9:37 in the morning twice. He doesn't accept either of those. 2 minutes later, she calls Nicole at 9:39. Then 2 minutes after that, she calls Nicole again at 9:41. Nicole does not accept. She moves on to Brian at 9:44. Brian does not accept. She goes back to Nicole at 9:46, who does not accept. 10:50, she calls her son. He doesn't accept. A minute later, she calls Brian. He doesn't accept. 2 minutes later, she calls Nicole. 10:53, she doesn't accept. Then she gives it 3 whole minutes and then calls Nicole again. Nicole does not accept. Then 2 minutes later, she calls her son at 10:58. He doesn't accept. She calls him at 1:19. He does not accept. She calls him again at 1:21. He does not accept. She goes back to calling Nicole. It's 1:23. Nicole does not accept. She calls her son at 1:44. He doesn't answer. So then she calls Peter at 2:00 and they talk for almost 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 24 seconds, and then he hangs up. 3:07, she calls him back. They talk for 29 minutes, 27 seconds, and then he hangs up. So maybe at this point, he's conveying that what has hit the docket. David LaFontaine of Helen and Keller fame she calls him 6:53, or no, 4:53, and they talk for 30 minutes. Peter G, she calls him also on the 3rd at 6:41. They talk for 22 minutes and 58 seconds, and she goes back to her son and talks to him or calls him at 7:33, 7:35. He doesn't answer. She moves on to Brian, 7:37, 7:39. He doesn't accept. And sorry, the son didn't accept on the other ones. I said didn't answer. No accepting. Number 2, I do not accept this call. On the 3rd, continuing, she calls her son at 7:41. So 2 minutes after calling Nicole, he does pick up the phone. They talk for 15 minutes and 19 seconds on a prepaid call. Then he hangs up. We go back to calling Nicole. This is the 4th. So in the morning at 8:47, 8:49, Nicole does not accept. 9:34, the inmate hangs up. 9:35, hangs up. And then she calls Nicole at 9:42, and there's no answer. So let's just see, what does that call log look like? 8:47, 8:49, 9:34, 9:35, 9:42. Girl, what didn't she mention she had a job while we were in the motion to relocate, reduce alimony, whatever we were in? Anyway. So 6 p.m. calls the son is not accepted. We're still on the 4th. 6:02 calls the son. They talk for 4 minutes and 24 seconds before he hangs up. Then she calls him back at 6:37. He doesn't accept. 6:39. He doesn't accept. 6:41. 6:49. 7:49. Or no, sorry, 8:49. He doesn't accept. Next morning, 8:44, she starts calling Nicole on the 5th of August. Nicole does not accept. She then calls Nicole 2 minutes later at 8:46. Then Nicole does not accept. At 10:06, Nicole picks up. They talk for 10 minutes and 28 seconds, and then Sarah hangs up. Still on the 5th, 11:30 in the morning, she calls Nicole. They talk for 18 minutes and 3 seconds.
I'm an airplane.
You're making an airplane? Then we have the 6 in the morning. 6 in the morning, police at my door. No, August 6th. 9:07 she calls, and Nicole doesn't accept. 9:09 she calls, Nicole doesn't accept. 9:28 she calls, Nicole doesn't accept. 9:31, 10:24, 10:26, 11:34. 1:11, 1:13. Nicole does not accept. Girl, imagine dating Sarah in high school, because presumably our impulse control gets better as we get older. Like, ma'am, I'm gonna need you to get some impulse control pills. Okay, 13 or 1:15 she calls her son. They talk for 22 seconds and then he hangs up. 1:41 she calls him on the 6th. 1:43. 6:15 not accepted. Then she calls it 6:17. They talk for 19 minutes, 9 seconds, and then he hangs up. She's calling Nicole, 1:33, 1:35. Nicole does not accept. She calls Peter, 1:53. They talk for 29 minutes, 39 seconds. Then she calls her son. We're still on the 7th at 5:49. He does not accept the call. She does not catch a hint. Bless you. Then on, did I say we're still on the 7th? Yes. 5:50, she calls her son. He doesn't accept. A minute later, she calls Brian. He doesn't accept. 2 minutes after that, she calls Brian. He doesn't accept. And then at 6:12, she calls her son. He doesn't accept. 6:14, he doesn't accept. Then the next day at 3:05, she calls her son, and it's a 25 second call, and then she hangs up. Pin lockout, she calls Peter G at 3:07. I don't know what the lockout is. Maybe they're like, girl, if you don't get off the phone. This is when the letter for transport goes out, 8/8, and then the letter for contempt regarding the visitation. So letter for transport came out from Sarah demanding that she be transported, and there was no hearing on her appearing telephonically. And then she also sent the letter for contempt saying Brian was ordered by the judge during their last pretrial conference to fill out this application in 2 weeks. None of that actually happened. So that letter comes out, hits the, or no, that's the day she creates it. Sorry, it's the day she creates it. I don't think it hits the docket yet. Let me just, did I put it on here?
Yeah.
It may be one or the other. I don't remember now. Okay. But, so she's locked out from calling Peter G, locked out from calling her son on the 8th. But then she calls her son at 3:35 and they talk for 14 minutes. I feel like the prison call log is sort of like a mystery, a puzzle. One day we'll figure it out. Probably not on Sarah, because we're going to stop following her pretty quick here. So we have, he hung up. They talked for 1:45 on the 8th. Then we go to the 9th. She calls him at 11:20 and he doesn't answer. Then she calls Brian at 11:22. Then 2 minutes later, she goes back to calling her son, 11:24, 11:26. He does not accept. Then 11:26 is Brian. Then she calls her son at 3:20. They talk for 3 minutes and 42 seconds, and then he hangs up. Then she calls him the next day on the 10th at 9:34. He doesn't answer. She calls Brian 2 minutes later. He doesn't accept. And then 2 minutes later, she calls her son again. He doesn't accept. I wonder if they're together laughing as the phone rings. Aha, she's calling again. No, I'm sure they're not doing that. I would be, but whatever. 10:21 on the 10th and 10:22 she calls Nicole. It's not accepted. Then we get to the 10th. We're still on the 10th. At 10:25, be careful, honey. She calls her son. They talk for 1 second and then he hangs up. She calls back at 10:59. It's not accepted. She calls Brian 2 minutes later at 11:01. Not accepted. She calls her son 2 minutes after that at 11:03. And he does not accept. She waits until the afternoon, 1:55. He does pick up. They talk for 21 minutes and 36 seconds, and then he hangs up. Now she's back to Peter on the 10th. She calls him at 4:36 and 5:20. He does not accept. At 5:57, she calls her son. And we know she's making him feel bad, according to Brian. What else do they have to talk about and so frequently? And if you were making my kid feel bad, I want to cut down on the calls too. Like, feel bad once a week, not 3, 4, 5, up to 7 times a week. Although in her mind, it's motivational. That's what she wrote in her pre-trial conference doc. According to Brian, it's not. Yeah. And she solicited hearsay in that, but she doesn't know any better. Why is he mad? Well, he said blah, blah, blah. Like, why would you? Anyway, so her ego, she's not thinking, again, no strategy. Okay, Peter G, she calls on the 10th at 7:42. No, it's not accepted. The next morning, 8:11, she starts out bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, calling her son at 8:40 in the morning. Thanks, Mom. He doesn't accept. 2 minutes later, she calls Brian, 8:42. He doesn't accept. Then 2 minutes after that, she calls Nicole at 8:44. She does not accept. Then she moves on. She gives it an hour or so. 10:10, she calls Peter G. Didn't accept. 3:20, called Peter G, didn't accept. 3:21, Peter G does not accept. Is that the sound the airplane makes?
Yeah.
Doesn't it go zzz? On the 11th, she calls the son at 3:38. And they talk for 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Then at 5:50, Peter G does not accept. She calls her son back on the 11th at 6:46, and they talk for almost 30 minutes. They're shy, by 6 seconds? 29 minutes and 54 seconds they talk. Not being satiated, she calls again at 7:37. He's like, I had enough. Oh no, the pin is like, y'all have talked enough. They got a pin lockout. So this one, it came from the prison this way with this orange band across it, and it's marked as collect. There's another one on here, but it says CPIQ multi-way call block. So someone out there, one of you guys, far smarter than I, will explain this to us, please. So I know if they have a 3-way call, those are forbidden. But if it's collect, how did the other person get on the call? Like, she called someone and they're paying for it, and then she called her son collect, and the system picked it up. Either way, it blocked the call. And I'm like, 8:11, because she was already talking to the son here, and then she calls him back. So she was talking to him at 7:37, or she called him and with the pin lockout, and it seems like she's trying to get around it. So 7:40, 3 minutes later, she calls him collect, but it's blocked. Someone let us know, oh wise one, what that means. So then on the 11th, she calls the son back. A minute after that, it's still the pin lockout. 2 minutes after that, still the pin lockout. And then 2 minutes after that, it's not accepted. Then she calls him a minute later at 7:46, and he hangs up. They talk for 9 minutes. Then she calls Nicole. It's a new day, 10:39 in the morning. They talk for 29 minutes and 48 seconds before Nicole hangs up. Then we have Peter G. One's at 3:30, one's at 4:42. 4:42, he accepts that one, and they talk for 29 minutes and 43 seconds. And then he hangs up. She calls her son on the 12th. That's a lot of talking to her. I'm sorry. She calls it 6:17, and they talk for 28 minutes and 46 seconds. So I think she's just bored because these are all in the 12. She's got a 30-minute call here, then another nearly 30 minutes, then another. That's like an hour and a half on the phone. Girl, what time is your job? What time are you researching your family law case? Okay, 17, so 5:57, she calls her son. He doesn't accept. This is the day that Brian's exhibit list hits the docket. She also calls her son 2 minutes after that, and it says time up. They talk for 1 minute. Then she calls Brian on the 14th at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:08 and 10:10. He doesn't accept. Yes.
What that?
It's really a camera, but I think you're pretending it's an airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's an airplane. She calls Nicole 10:12. 2 minutes later, 10:14, not accepted. 2 minutes after that, she calls Brian at 10:16. Yeah, it is. What sound does it make? Vroom, vroom. Or maybe it's like a hum. Uh-oh, be careful.
The airplane. Ah.
It broke? Oh no, it fell. Not out of the sky. I hope all the passengers are okay. So then she calls Peter G on the 14th at 2:22. She hangs up before he can do anything. She calls Brian 1 minute later, 2:45.
How about the engine?
And I think I said 2:22 because I'm subtracting here. It should have been 2:44 and then 2:45. Brian doesn't accept. She calls her son at 5:46. They talk for 30 minutes and then they run out of time. She calls Nicole on the 15th of August at 9:06, and Nicole does not answer. Calls her back 2 minutes later. She doesn't answer. Oh no, don't take that off. And then also on the 15th in the evening, 6:54, she calls her son. They talk for 29 minutes, 57 seconds. She calls him the next day in the morning at 10:59. He doesn't accept. So on the 16th, 11:01, Nicole answers the phone. They talk for 22 minutes and 48 seconds. That is on a prepay call. The 16th, she calls her son again. Now it is in the evening, 4:55. He doesn't accept. She calls him back at 4:57. He does accept 55 seconds, and then there's a hang up by the son. She times out. She calls him again at 6 o'clock. They talk for 30 minutes. So maybe the other one was like, call me at 6. And they run out of time. The next day, she starts calling the son again at 9:33 in the morning, then 9:58, then 10 o'clock, then 10:53. He does not accept. She calls her brother on the 17th, 12:47, 12:49, 2:16, 2:18. He does not answer. So I wonder, she must be asking for something. Because what could be that urgent? So on the 17th, she calls her son at 2:20, no answer. Then she calls Veronica Pena, which the only other Pena we know is Christina, but I couldn't triangulate to confirm that that's her mother's name. So it may just be a coincidence. We know she knows two Christina. She could know two different Penas. So 2:32, she calls her though. And remember when she was in the county detention center, and those tablet messages, Christina would be like, call my mom's phone, call my mom's phone. But I feel like they are not living in the same state anymore. I'm not sure. Anyway, she calls, it's not accepted. She calls her brother 2 minutes later at 2:34, and it's not accepted.
Mommy!
And then she calls this Jennifer DeGraff again.
What's
Yes.
that?
Airplane.
What's that?
It's an airplane. Then we have, so Jennifer DeGraff doesn't accept. Danielle Parsons, who is a familiar name, doesn't accept.
What's that?
It's an airplane.
Airplane.
Yeah, you need to wipe your nose though. And you have wait, dog hair.
Oh, yeah.
You're not gonna wipe your nose?
No.
Why? You got dry boogies. Okay. 14:38. So 2:38. Danielle does not answer.
Yeah.
Then there's an Alex Pena and Christina reappears. She does not accept, but it's been a minute since Sarah's called her. She calls her on the 17th at 2:42. Then she calls Philip also on the 17th, 4:49, 5:39. Philip does not accept. 2 minutes later, 5:41, she calls her son, who does not accept. Brian, 5:43, doesn't accept. Son, 7:02, doesn't accept. Calls Philip. He finally answers on the 17th at 7:09 p.m. They talk for 18 minutes and 43 seconds. Then Philip hangs up. Pin lockout with her son at 7:37. Then we have still on the 17th, 8:46. They talk for 15 minutes and 4 seconds before he hangs up. Then she calls Peter G. 10:03, 10:04, the morning of the 18th. He accepts neither one. 1 minute later, she calls Nicole, and Nicole, it says it just hung up. There's no duration. Then she goes back to calling Peter. She calls him at 10:28, not accepted. A minute later, she calls Nicole, not accepted. 2 minutes later, she calls Peter again, not accepted. Then at 10:32, Nicole answers. They talk for 4 minutes and 43 seconds. Then Nicole hangs up. She's got a pin lockout with Peter after calling him at 11:02 on the 18th. And then we have one of these weird collect three-way block calls again. So at 11:04, she calls Peter. This is again after a pin lockout. It's 0 because it's blocked. Then she's still got Then she's still got a pin lockout for Peter at 11:04 on the 18th. No, don't put it on the keyboard, honey. It'll break. No, don't do that.
What's that?
Then, let's see. Nicole. So 8:18, 11:05. She calls Nicole. Nothing. 11:07, 2 minutes later, she calls Peter. Nothing. 2 minutes after that, she calls Nicole. Nicole answers. They talk for 29 minutes and 39 seconds. Then she calls her son at 6:07 and 6:09. He does not answer. 6:59. He does not answer. And that is all, folks. That is all. So a little bit of a flurry every now and again, but I don't understand, like, oh, the sun's coming through. Why it's back to back like that. Oh, the curtain closed.
Mommy,
It's
Mommy.
early in the morning, and it's an east-facing window, so the sun, she rises.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I want it.
Rises, sun rises. Yes, it does. Okay, what do you guys think? Less people are accepting her. She's getting a little more frenetic with her calls, like 1 minute apart, 2 minute apart. How do you even dial that fast? And then you've got to listen to the audio. Like she's... Hopefully her job has something to do with the phone because she's quick with it. She's quick. Or maybe hopefully she didn't work a 10 key that way. If you know, you know. All right, that was it. That was a lot of calls. I will talk to you later. Uh-oh. Now my son's turning off the lights.
Hey, Mommy.
Okay, yeah, leave it on. Leave the light on. I'll talk to you later. Toodles.
Toodles.